One of the things that we know about depression is that it's usually associated with an ongoing cycle of negative thinking that seems impossible to get away from. This is a continuation of our video series talking about tools to manage and overcome symptoms of depression. And in the last number of videos, we've been focusing on thinking patterns that maintain and worsen depression and ways of overcoming these negative thinking patterns by using a 4-column thought record. And in depression, we know that the negative thinking patterns that contribute to depression spiral in relation to a series of thoughts and assumptions that's called the cognitive triad. And the cognitive triad is a pattern of thinking that involves distorted negative beliefs about the self, the world and other people, and the future. There's inherently something wrong with me, the world is a terrible place filled with awful people, and the future is grim and bleak. So what I want to focus on is the first part of this negative triad, which are negative beliefs or assumptions about the self. These are those thoughts that you tell yourself that you're not good enough, that you don't measure up, that you're a failure in some fundamental way. And there are a number of assumptions that people will hold in depression that are examples of this type of negative thinking about the self. The first example is the belief that everything I do must be flawless, otherwise I'm a failure. This belief and assumption is rooted in perfectionism and is fueled by societal pressures that push us to constantly try to be perfect. The big problem with this is that nobody's perfect, and no one does everything perfectly. In fact, nearly everything we do has some level of imperfection to it. So when you believe that everything needs to be perfect or that you must be perfect to feel good about yourself, what you're doing is that you're setting yourself up for constant feelings of failure and dissatisfaction. Rather than recognizing your achievements and what you accomplish, you only focus on your shortcomings and mistakes and the things like, I could have done that better. Another problem with this assumption is that it can lead to avoiding new challenges or doing new things that might be outside of your comfort zone. Learning something new inherently involves making mistakes, but if you feel like you constantly have to be perfect, making those types of mistakes can feel intolerable. So by holding this assumption that everything you do must be perfect, this results in your world becoming smaller and smaller and smaller, as the fear of making mistakes prevents you from doing anything new. In essence, if you constantly feel the need to be perfect, your world becomes more constricted as the fear of making mistakes prevents you from exploring any new opportunities. Another common assumption in depression is the belief that your worth comes solely from doing things for other people. This is a big one for moms who often feel that they must always make the needs of others a priority, putting themselves last because they think that's what they're supposed to do to be a good mom or to be a good wife. Now, while there's nothing necessarily wrong with caring for others, I want to be clear about that. There's nothing wrong with that. But this becomes a problem when you consistently sacrifice your own well-being for the sake of other people. So if you've ever felt guilty about taking time for yourself or doing something for you, those feelings of guilt are probably due to this assumption. And this tendency to always put others first, neglecting your own needs, this can be a direct path to depression. The key is to remember that you matter too, and that self-care isn't some sort of selfish luxury, but a necessity. If you're not taking care of yourself, you're going to burn out, which is going to leave you with little energy to take care of others. And if you find yourself unable to care for people the way that you once did, this can then lead to even more feelings of inadequacy or failure, which can make depression worse. Another negative assumption or belief involves the notion that I must always be at 100% peak efficiency and peak performance. This idea is often reinforced in society, where it's no longer good enough to give 100%, but now you need to give 110%. This is also promoted in slogans like "no days off," or "I'll sleep when I'm dead," or "if you're not going to give your best, don't even bother trying." Now, while these ideas might sound really motivating and look great on t-shirts, actually trying to live up to these ideals is a recipe for burnout, failure, and depression. Think about the implications of this. If you've ever set a personal best in anything, whether it's your fastest run or the best grade you've ever gotten, and you believe that you always have to be at peak efficiency, what this means is that you have to match or exceed that personal best every single time. You can't have any slower days, you can never get lower marks, because that would mean that you're not performing at 100%. And if you're not operating at 100%, it becomes a failure, a disaster. And now there's even more pressure to push yourself harder, which is unsustainable and is just a recipe for never feeling satisfied. So while this assumption might seem noble and virtuous, it's actually a really damaging and destructive mindset that often does far more harm than good. The next assumption I want to discuss is the belief that I need someone stronger, more capable, or more powerful than myself to rely on. At the heart of this assumption are thoughts like, I can't do it on my own, I'm not capable, and therefore I need someone's help to step in and to take care of me. Now, it's important to recognize that we all need help from time to time, and there's nothing wrong with that. So the idea isn't that you should be able to handle everything on your own without ever asking for help. But if you hold the belief that you always need someone else to rely on, it can leave you feeling helpless because it means you're dependent on someone else to take care of you. And think about the implications of this mindset. If you're in a relationship and you believe that you're dependent on your partner and rely on them for everything, this is likely going to prevent you from taking responsibility for aspects of the relationship. This could lead a person to be fearful of expressing their needs or disagreeing with their partner out of fear that if they make their partner unhappy and their partner leaves, there will be no one to take care of them. And as you can imagine, this just results in a person feeling dissatisfied and overly dependent on their partner. So in this example, it's important to remember that you were able to manage your life before you met your partner, which is evidence that you're capable of handling life on your own and that you can be independent. It becomes really important to remember the things that you've accomplished on your own in your life to help break out of this mindset. And related to this is the belief or the assumption that if others disagree with me, then I must be wrong. This can be a particularly difficult assumption for someone in depression because depression often comes with a lack of self-confidence or self-belief. And it's probably pretty easy to see how holding this belief might feed into that cycle of depression. This may be a belief that you hold if you find that you often wait to hear what other people think before you express your own views on a topic. So if you're in a work meeting, you might find yourself holding back your opinion until you've gotten a general sense of the consensus of how everyone else in the meeting is feeling, and then, and only then, you might then share something that is in agreement with what others have said. And the reason people do this is out of concern that if their opinion differs from the majority, then that means they must be wrong. And it would be really embarrassing to express a viewpoint that was wrong in front of other people. So the underlying belief here is that I don't have the right to hold an opinion that differs from other people because I'm likely wrong. But is that always true? Imagine how the world would be if no one ever had differing opinions, or if people didn't think about situations from different perspectives. The idea here isn't about convincing yourself that you're always right or that others must be wrong if they disagree with you. Rather, it's more about having a healthy respect for your own opinions and beliefs and recognizing that it's not a bad thing to express your thoughts, even if those thoughts differ from the people around you. And by doing this, you don't assume that any other people have all the answers, but that you might have something meaningful and important to share, and that others would be interested in hearing your perspective. And the last of the negative beliefs about the self that I want to talk about is the assumption that anger is inherently bad. In our society, we often categorize emotions as either good emotions or bad emotions. Good emotions are things like happiness and joy and contentment and peace, while bad emotions are things like sadness and guilt and fear and anger. And from a young age, we're often taught to suppress or ignore anger, viewing anger as something that's irrational, destructive, or just plain wrong. If I hold the belief that anger is bad, what that means is that when I'm feeling angry, I'm doing something wrong. And so we often try to bottle up or deny feelings of anger, which rarely works and just leads to even stronger feelings of resentment or frustration. The key point is to recognize that anger in and of itself isn't a bad thing. Anger is normal and a healthy human emotion. It's there to alert us when someone is causing harm to us or someone we care about, and it's designed to motivate us to take action to stop it. Whether that's saying no, standing up for ourselves, or stopping a person from crossing our boundaries, anger is a necessary emotion that protects ourselves and those that we care about. Anger only becomes a problem when it's expressed in harmful or destructive ways. That can be verbally or physically. But aggression isn't the only way to express anger. So rather than viewing anger as something to ignore or suppress, the focus should be on expressing it in productive ways. And so while you're working on your 4-column thought records, you might find that you notice a lot of these assumptions and beliefs in that 3rd column of the thought record. And by being more aware of these common negative beliefs or assumptions about the self, you can become better able to spot those negative thinking patterns more quickly and then challenging them more effectively. And if you're interested in learning more about anger or better ways of expressing anger, I encourage you to check out this video. So that's all for today's video. As always, thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video, and I will see you in the next one.